Hi people, welcome back to my channel. Today I wanted to share with you all the books that I read in the fall time. So all the books that I read in September, October and November. And I have this big stack of books over here. These are all the books that I have read, except for 4 of them, because one I read on audiobook and I do not have a physical copy of that. And 3 of them I actually sold back to the bookstore because I did not like them. In total, I have read 16 books over the fall, over those 3 months. And if you have watched my TBRs for those months, 16 books is definitely not as many as I wanted to read. My goal actually was reading 10 books every month. So I am 14 books short of that goal. I basically only read half as many books as I wanted to. This is a problem that I have. I set my goals too high realistically, but I feel like if I do not do that, I will not. See, if my goal is way too high, I will still manage to make it halfway. So that's more than not making anything, I guess. No, this is a problem. This is something I'm working on in therapy for sure. So I'm going to try and keep this spoiler free, but if there are going to be any spoilers, I will put a warning on screen before the spoiler comes. So but I will try and keep it spoiler free entirely. So don't worry about spoilers. And let's really quickly just get into the downers of this video, the ones that I DNF'd, the ones that I didn't like. Let's start with that, get that out of the way, and then get to the books that I did like. So first off, I DNF'd The Invisible Library by Genevieve Cogman. This one, I did get pretty far into the book. I think I read about 200 pages, which is 2/3 into the book. But yeah, I did have to put it down eventually. The thing with this book is that the idea of the book, the premise, is very good. So I really wanted to like this book. It was a great idea, and plus I'm still having trouble with when do you actually DNF a book? When do you give up on a book? I am still struggling with that. So twofold why I read so much of this book before finally DNFing. But let's get into this book. So this book is about a invisible library, like the title says. And this library exists in between realms, basically. And there is a lot of alternate realities in this world. And all the alternate realities have basically all the same books. But in some realities, there are books that are not that do not exist in other realities, and there's also certain books that are just slightly different from all the other realities. So those books are rare, and for this invisible library there are a lot of spies at work that go into these different realities to retrieve those rare books. And you know, that sounds like such a fun premise. And there's also the fact that in these alternate realities there can be mythical creatures, there can be magic, and it can also be kind of sci-fi-y. So that sounds like a lot of fun. And maybe you can already guess that 300 pages for such a book is not enough. And I think this is one of the problems of this book. It's trying to put so much in such a little space, so little pages. The characters fell flat. It was like every character was the same. There was no actual dimension to these characters, and they didn't really have their own personalities at all. So that sucks. It's usually, you do need the characters to be interesting and fun and have their own personalities to really be able to relate to them and want to spend so much time with them. So that was part of the problem. And also the writing of this book just I didn't like it. And for a book that is basically about the love of books, the writing just definitely was not there. It could have been so much better. So I think that this book would have been so much better if the author just took more time to write it. and accepted more help to better it, and also took more pages to really flesh this story out. Because the world building itself was also very clumsily done, in my opinion. So let's move on to the next book that I DNF'd, which was Bright Young Women by Jessica Knoll. And this one is written by a journalist, and this journalist, she wanted to write about the victims of this very famous serial killer and give them their voice back and empower them in a way. So her story is heavily inspired by the story of Ted Bundy, and you can definitely tell. I DNF'd this one after about 100 pages because I just couldn't really get into it. I couldn't connect to the characters. And also, something that really bothered me about this book, and it just kept going through my mind, and I was like, okay, let's just DNF this. The fact that the author wanted to give a voice back to the victims, but then really focused still on the serial killer was bothering me. And also, she could have just made up a story and in that way inspired people to think about giving so much attention to serial killers instead of the victims, and maybe refocus their mind and really pay more attention to victims instead of serial killers. Instead of doing that, she took a very well-known story from a serial killer that is very well known and people are very obsessed with for some reason. She took that and basically made a book about him, and so still gave him a lot of attention and a lot of media, an entire book. Yeah, that just kind of bothered me, and I was like, yeah, no, yeah, it just wasn't for me. I think it definitely would have worked better if it was just entirely fictional instead of based upon a well-known serial killer. So I got about 25% through that book before I DNF'd it. And the last book I DNF'd last season was Sisters of Shadow by Catherine Leipzig. So this one was it was boring to me. I DNF'd it after about a third of the way through. I couldn't connect to the characters. It just felt boring. It wasn't exciting at all. I didn't feel curious about the rest of the book, so I thought maybe I should just DNF this because I don't like it. So I did that, and yeah, there's not really that much more to say about that. I just didn't like it. Before we get into the books that I did enjoy, there is still one in my pile that I did not enjoy at all. The Silence of the Girls by Pat Barker. I really did not enjoy this. I did finish this one. I did listen to this on audiobook, so that might have something to do with it because I just didn't like the way she was talking. This one is about the Trojan War, but it is told from the perspective of a woman, a former queen, Briseis, who was enslaved to Achilles. So she was Achilles' bed slave, and she also gets used as a kind of pawn in a politics type of way. There's a power struggle between Achilles and some other men in the camp of the Greeks, and Briseis basically gets used as a pawn in that power struggle. So that's gross. You really get to see what this type of war does to women, and the way women get used after their cities have been captured and their husbands and sons have been murdered, and how they get treated after that. But yeah, I think it's also because of the audiobook, because the woman that did the audiobook, she was talking in a very whiny type of voice, which sounds bad, but yeah, that just really is the way she was talking. Yeah, I didn't like that. And I also didn't like the way these women were entirely powerless and couldn't do anything, and they would just give themselves over to their faith. And this is something that happens a lot in modern media. We look back at people from the past and we feel like these people were dumb, these people were stupid, these people couldn't do anything. These women they were basically slaves to their husbands and basically slaves to other men, and they would never stand up for themselves in any way, and they just didn't have their will, their own willpower. That just bothers me. I just cannot believe that millennia of women before us did not have their own voice and did not stand up for themselves and for their children, for other women. I cannot believe that. And maybe it is so, but I just don't like it. So uh, also didn't like this. I gave it 2 stars. And let's move on to some books that I did like and get back into the positive of this video. I read Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies over the fall, and I really love this one. I gave it 4.5 stars. It was a very cozy read. I really liked the premise of it. So this is about a scholar, a woman, who is doing research, and it is a qualitative type of research into some very elusive type of fairies that live in this remote island. It's in the town of Ravensvik, which some Scandinavian island, so it's very snowy. And she just kind of goes and looks for these fairies, and she is writing an encyclopedia about fairies, and these are the last ones that she needs to write about. This book reads as her field notes, so that's already really fun. Her colleague also, she didn't know this, but her colleague shows up after like 1 or 2 days that she's there. Her colleague shows up, and he is very fun and loving, and she is the opposite of that. She's bad with people. She is kind of a loner, can come across as a little bit grumpy. So it's really that combination of characters that is really fun. This is middle grade, so there were a lot of plot lines that I was able to guess based on context clues, but that's, it's a children's book, so that's should be the case probably. I cannot fault it on that. And I really enjoyed this one. I ordered part 2 already. That's on pre-order right now. It comes out in January, I believe. It's also just a beautiful book. It's just plain blue on the inside, but look at the sleeve. It's so beautiful. I wouldn't necessarily say that this is a cozy fantasy, but it is cozy and it is fantasy. But there are some a little bit of high stake things that happen in here, but also it's a children's book, so it's not too scary. Yeah, 4.5 stars. I really love this one. I also read, well, I didn't really read, I read it, okay. I listened to The Hobbit on audiobook, which is very fun because it really was like being read a story, a bedtime story. This is about the Hobbit who goes on a quest with a lot of dwarfs and Gandalf the wizard. They encounter a lot of problems along the way, and there is like a lot of little stories in this overall overarching story. So it felt really like being read little bedtime stories the entire time while listening to this. So I would really recommend listening to this on audiobook. I read this one because I want to read The Lord of the Rings this month, and I really loved it. So yeah, I gave this also 4.5 stars, and I would really recommend this one. Next, I read The Name of the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss. His name is disappearing because of me holding the book. I really loved this one. This is a 5-star read for me, and I don't give out 5 stars easily. This one is about Kvoti, who is a innkeeper. In the first few chapters, you realize that he is not just an innkeeper, he is a famous person who has led a very interesting life with a lot of action. And so a storyteller comes into town, and he was actually tracking this innkeeper down. Even though he didn't want to be found, he was found by this storyteller, and the storyteller asked him to tell his story to him. So he does. And this book is the first part of that story, where he talks about his youth and his time at university. And it is all very tragic, and it is very fun, and there is a lot of good thing that happens. There's a lot of bad things that happen. And yeah, it's just a very epic kind of book. It's very layered. The characters are very well fleshed out. I liked the world building. I liked the magic system. I just really, really, really liked this book. Also because of the way that the characters felt so real. They were very well written in a way that they could be real people. And the conversations between the characters and the relationships that the characters had with each other also felt very realistic. And the characters were all not just good people, good people, good people all the time, or bad people, bad people, bad people all the time. They were layered, as I said. They were dimensional. They did bad things sometimes, even though they knew they were bad things to do, but still did them because they were the best thing for them to do at that time, or maybe not even the best thing for them, but it would give them the most gain in that moment. For example, let me just give an example. So he, at some point, the main character steals something from a store, which is a bad thing to do. And he didn't need to do it exactly because he already had some money, but he did it anyway because that way he could have a little bit of more money. And he did come from a background of having nothing at all. So it is understandable that he did it, but it is a bad thing to do. And he still did it, and he knew that it was a bad thing to do. You know, it was realistic in a way where most books just write characters that are still realistic, but maybe too noble in a way. So I really love this one. I would recommend it to anyone who feels like it. Next, I read X Hex by Erin Sterling, and I really enjoyed this one. I gave it 3.5 stars. This is about a girl who lives in a town founded by a specific family, and she is a witch. And in this town, it is around Halloween time, and there's going to be festivities. And there is a source of power in this town, and the original family that founded this town lives in England, and they have to come every 8 years, I believe, to restore that source of power. So the youngest son of that family comes into town. This boy that gets into town, well, no, he's a young man. So he gets into town, and he has been there once before to go to school there. And the girl, the witch, and him 8 years back, something like that, they hooked up, and they were in love. And then he up and left, and she cursed him. And now that he is back, the curse starts to work. And because of the curse, the source of power in the town it's broken. So they have to find a way to fix this source of power, and they have to find out why this happened and how they can reverse it. It was just really fun, and this was a cozy fantasy. Even though there was high stakes, these stakes were, I don't know, it was very cozy to me. And in the town that they are in, it's a small town, and they were having festivities for Halloween, and you really get to see that as well. It just was really magical and cozy, and it's a romance. Yeah, I would recommend this for anyone wanting to read some whimsical romance, cozy fantasy type of vibes. This was fun. I also read Frankenstein by Mary Shelley in October, I believe. I thought that would be the perfect month for some gothic novels, so I also read Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde that month. And this was fun. I liked it. It started off with kind of a conspiracy type of vibe where someone is looking for. They say that there is a land in Antarctica where there is no snow, but there are still dinosaurs and stuff like that. Someone is looking for that. That is where it starts, and then we get to meet Dr. Frankenstein, who tells his life story to that person that's looking for that land. Anyway, so Dr. Frankenstein's story about how he tried to make life out of dead bodies that he sews together, and how he gets very depressed after that works. And then we get the story from this monster that Dr. Frankenstein made, and how he felt after being made and after not getting love. And it was really heartbreaking to read that, and it was a beautiful story about well, it was about a monster, but about how people can become monsters if they do not get the love that they deserve and that they need to grow into functioning human beings. And it was a beautiful story. Gave this 4 stars and would really recommend you to read it as well, because it gives this very beautiful look into the mind of someone that is very has a lot of love to give, but because of the way that he gets rejected over and over again, that love turns into hate. And I think it's a very important story, and it's also just a kind of fun story in a way. Even though it's very sad. But yeah, I would recommend that to anyone. So next I read Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde by Robert Louis Stevenson. And I think this is more of a children's story. But anyway, this is about Dr. Jekyll, who is a very good man, and he gets tired of being good. So he produces a potion of some sort. Yeah, it's a potion. When he drinks this potion, he turns into Mr. Hyde, and Mr. Hyde is all out bad. So this is a story about good and evil, and how everyone has both good and evil in them. I liked Frankenstein better than I liked this one. I gave this one 3.5 stars, but it was still a very fun story to read. It was kind of a detective, because you don't learn who Mr. Hyde is up until the end of the book. I already spoiled it for you, sorry. Yeah, would recommend this one as well. It's a very short read as well. I also read Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros, and I really loved this one as well. I think I gave this 4 stars. This is about a girl who lives in a world where the country is kind of torn up by war, and she has 2 parents. Her mother is a military woman who's very high up in the military chain, and her dad was a scribe in this world, and he died, and her brother died as well. This is where we start. And she has trained with her dad her whole life to become a scribe as well. But then, half a year before the school would start for her, her mother kind of forces her to go into the military school of this country. And in this military school, people learn how to ride a dragon. You bond with the dragon and you become a dragon rider. It's a very brutal school. I believe 75% of all people that enlist in this school die in the first year. So and these are people that have trained their entire life to become a dragon rider. And she just started training 6 months before she has to enlist. Yeah, this is about her going to that school and trying to survive that first year of school. I really liked it. There's a romance plot in here as well, of course. I believe Goodreads has given it an award for the best romantasy of the year. It was very hyped up, but I did really like it as well. Yeah, 4 stars for me. I already got Iron Flame here, but I haven't read that one yet. It is on the list. So I also read The Love Hypothesis by Ellie Hazelwood. I read this in September because in September I wanted to read some dark academia themed books, and this is not dark academia. This isn't, but it is academia. It takes place in academia. So it is about this woman who is doing her PhD, and she starts fake dating one of the professors because, well, it's a stupid reason. So she sees her best friend in the hallway, and the first thing she does is kiss the first man that she sees in this hallway, so that her best friend will think that she's over her last boyfriend, so that her best friend can date this ex-boyfriend of hers because she thinks they fit together well. She's over him completely. She didn't even like him in the first place. So she wants them to date, but her best friend won't date him because it's her ex, girl code. So she starts kissing the first person she sees, and it ends up being one of the professors of her school. And then they start fake dating to keep this lie up. And fake dating ends up usually in in these books, at least in actual dating, and it was just really fun to read a romance that is set in a academia setting, because I go to school as well, and I just really enjoyed reading about that. So I'm definitely going to pick up some more of Ellie Hazelwood's books in the future. Next, The Grace Year by Kim Liggett. This is young adult, I believe, and this is about a world where it is kind of like The Handmaid's Tale meets Lord of the Flies. In this society where these girls grow up in, every year a group of girls that turns 16 that year gets turned away. They go to a sort of camp, and there they have to spend the year alone with just those girls to get rid of their magic. They have to get rid of their magic, and nobody talks about it afterwards. So we follow one of these girls that feels like she is different from everybody else in this world, and we just follow her while she is doing this grace year with her group. A lot of girls don't make it back after this grace year, and also what happens before they leave, they get chosen by one of the men from their town to get married to after they come back from their grace years. This society is very sexist, and we just follow this story to see if something can be done about that. I really liked it. It was fine. 4 stars for me. I thought that it was a type of commentary on the way women get treated. Also, the way that this girl believes herself so different from everybody, and in the end comes to the realization that maybe she isn't. I thought that was fun. It really made me think about myself in some ways as well. So really enjoyed this one. 4 stars for me, would recommend. So next up, I read Northanger Abbey by Jane Austen. I want to read more classics. This is also why I read Frankenstein, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. And this one is a novel about a girl who goes with a family to Bath and spends her time in Bath. After a while, she goes to this big house called Northanger Abbey, and there she imagines herself in one of her scary novels, her gothic type of novels where some mystery is happening in the house. And it's just really funny to read about that. And she is a young girl, so it's a fun book. It's a Jane Austen novel. Jane Austen is always, at least I always like Jane Austen's novels a lot. And yeah, would recommend this one as well. And she also is kind of naive, and she learns through her experiences that not everybody is the same as her, and not everybody is noble, and not everybody is a nice person, even though they act like they are. Like this one, 4 stars. And the last book I have to talk about is Daughter of the Moon Goddess. I gave this one 3 stars. It wasn't as good as I had hoped it would be. It was a very beautiful book. The descriptions of the places were very beautiful, but there was just too much in the story that I didn't like. This is about the daughter of the moon goddess, and she lives with her mother, the moon goddess, in exile. And one day she flares her magic, and because of that, the emperor realizes that there probably is someone else with the moon goddess, and there's not supposed to be. So they come to their house, and this girl has to flee, and she ends up becoming, through sheer luck, basically, she ends up becoming the emperor's son learning companion. So she lives in the palace, and she goes to school with the son's emperor, the only one. There's the two of them, and she learns a lot. But the thing that is most valuable to her is learning to use the bow, and she becomes very good at it. And then she goes into the military, but all the while she is trying to save her mother and free her mother. and also dragons get involved, so that's fun. But I didn't like the way it was written. The progression of the story was kind of weird to me. In some spots I got confused a lot, but the descriptions of the places and the people were very beautiful. So it's you know I there's a lot of people that would really love this. I am very sure of that, but I didn't love it as much. So 3 stars for me. And that were all the books that I read over the fall. I hope you got some inspiration for your reading from this video. I would like to know if you have read any of these books, what you thought about them, and also leave your book recommendations down below, please. Thank you so much for watching. Like this video if you liked it, subscribe if you want to see more from me, and that's it for me for today. Thank you so much for watching. Bye!